The ANC's National Elective Conference this week, the party will be electing their leadership. On the line, we're joined by Friedman, who's going to be talking to us about the ANC's elective processes and what that entails. Now, Doctor, please take us into the ANC's nomination process as we are about a week into Mangaung.
Well, essentially, the way in which the process works is that 90% of the votes at any ANC conference, 91% at this particular conference, must be given to people who represent the branches. So it is essentially the branches who decide who the leaders of the ANC should be. There is a minority of votes which are distributed among the provinces. 9 provinces get 180 votes between them, the provincial executive committees, and then the 3 leagues of the ANC get the rest of the votes. But clearly, if you consider that it's 91% are cast by the branches, essentially the leaders of the ANC are elected by the representatives of the branches. And what we've been seeing over the last few weeks is those branches gathering in provincial general council meetings throughout the country to express their support for the various candidates. If we want to know who's winning and who's losing, then we just have to count up the number of votes which branches are casting in the provincial conferences, and then we get a very clear sense of which candidates are popular and which are not.
And then in terms of all the voting, is the voting going to be limited to the ANC's top 6, or is the voting going to be spread into the different structures of the party, like, for example, the NEC and beyond?
Well, the top 6 and the National Executive Committee, the NEC, are elected. Mm-hmm. But no, those are the only 2. So there are elections for the National Executive Committee. It's not clear how many people will be elected. At the moment, there are 83 members of the NEC, but there's a proposal before Congress to reduce that to 60. So how many are actually voted on will depend on whether that resolution is passed or not. But it will be at least 60 members of the National Executive Committee.
And then in terms of all the other issues that are within Mangaung, looking beyond the nominations and the voting, what are the other issues that one needs to keep an eye out for during the conference?
Well, of course, Mangaung is also the national conference of the ANC, and it's the only place in which the ANC can make policy. So there will be many policy resolutions which will be debated, and the outcome will be announced. It's very important to stress that just because a resolution is passed at an ANC conference doesn't mean that it will become law or government policy. The governing party might have 66% of the votes nationally, but the government does not simply implement governing party policy. The government has to care about the concerns of the whole of the country. And so anything which comes out of Mangaung will be a proposal which will then have to go to the relevant government department and may or may not be implemented. But there also are quite a few resolutions which deal with the internal affairs of the African National Congress, and of course those would be implemented immediately if they're passed. So it is an opportunity on which the ANC expresses itself on policy issues and also addresses any internal problems which it may be facing.
Now, Professor, what do you see coming out of Mangaung?
Well, I think a lot of fuss is going to be made out of the economic policy resolutions, and I think that fuss will be misleading because I don't think economic policy is going to change. There's going to be, I think, a lot of ignorance about this. You're going to hear a lot of talk about selective nationalization, and people are going to insist that this is a policy change. In fact, selective nationalization has been ANC policy for 20 years. So I don't see any major change on economic policy. What will be very interesting is to see whether the ANC passes a resolution which would force political parties and politicians to disclose to the public where they got their funding, whether they pass resolutions which are supposed to address the internal problems which the ANC has, factionalism, claims that people are using unfair methods in order to win elections, and also whether issues like legislation, the traditional courts bill, for example, which is very controversial within the ANC, whether we will have a resolution at Mangaung which will try and set ANC policy on those issues.
Professor Friedman, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.